Thanks for tuning into this week's Stacker Chat. Stacks is smart contracts for Bitcoin, and I'm joined by Muneeb Ali, Stacks founder, with your weekly updates. Now, the Stacks ecosystem is fully decentralized. Can you provide an overview of some of the key players and benefits to that decentralization?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think for people who are new, I know that some of the Stacks team members were hacking on Bitcoin applications even before 2017. But in general, I think 2017 is when really the project came together. The first white paper came out. We raised kind of like the initial capital through the token offering in 2017. And the years after that were really about hardcore R&D, infrastructure building, and leading up to the mainnet launch in January of 2021, so last year. And interestingly, I think as the mainnet launch was approaching, even like a year or so before that, a bunch of the early team members behind the project, they very organically kind of like went off to start different companies and initiatives within the Stacks ecosystem. So the original company, like I think I like to think of that as almost like it was like a research lab, right? And then several of the people that were working there, they kind of like went off and did different things in the ecosystem. So the original company today survives as Hero Systems, which is now a dev tooling company. So they used to do something completely different like before, and actually used to take on different type of functionality as well. But since the mainnet launch, Hero has narrowed down its focus to basically being a dev tooling company. And there are a bunch of different entities in the ecosystem now. There's a nonprofit Stacks Foundation that a bunch of you would be familiar with, that looks at governance of the protocol, different grants, and generally kind of looking at increasing the open source commits and involvement from the community in the ecosystem. There's obviously Trust Machines, which is the new entity that I'm involved with, which is focused on building applications, right? So it's taking a very broad approach to unlocking the true potential of Bitcoin through Stacks and coming in and building these applications using Stacks. And there are so many other players as well. There's Daemon Technologies based out of Hong Kong that looks at mining and other type of data dashboards and interesting things. There's New Internet Labs that is working on a new types of UX interfaces to this world. And also Larry there is doing a bunch of work on naming systems. There are mobile apps out there by Secret Key Labs. And I think the list kind of like goes on and on and on, right? So this ecosystem is actually decentralized, I like to think about it, instead of being in a situation where you have a protocol and then one large company is really behind it, right? So over time, I think the community has also absorbed the fact that this ecosystem is much more decentralized than some of the other crypto projects that you might see. And it comes with both kind of like benefits and challenges as well, right? Like it's not that decentralization only has benefits, like some things become harder as well because there's no central entity that is coordinating everything. There's no kind of like, one player that can just give you a roadmap or like provide customer service, so to speak, right? Like it is a decentralized project, and the community members kind of like have to learn to work together in this ecosystem.
Thank you. Now, we saw MetaMask become unavailable to certain jurisdictions this past week. Can you speak to the vulnerabilities that decentralized ecosystems have when it comes to political and regulatory compliance, and how we can really build for the long term?
Yeah, so I think this is a very important question, right? Like a lot of people that I talk to, they ask me this question that, hey, this is great that, in these early days, a lot of the founders like you are super excited about decentralization, and they are excited about building open protocols. But what will happen over time? Because isn't there like some sort of a natural pull for re-centralization on top of decentralized systems? Like if you remember, the original internet, in fact, was pretty decentralized in the beginning, not as decentralized as Bitcoin, and some of the crypto protocols, but fairly decentralized in the grand scheme of things. And over time, we saw like big companies built on top that almost like centralize a lot of the actual choke points on the internet that are so on a day-to-day basis. The normal interaction that a typical internet user has is actually fairly centralized right today. So can the same thing happen on top of crypto protocols as well? One example would be that, let's say there is one big exchange like Coinbase that really takes off and most people are just interacting through that exchange. And for various reasons, that exchange can actually like seize your assets or close certain accounts and deny service, which as a business and a company, they can do that. And in many ways, you have to kind of like they have to comply with any applicable law in the jurisdiction that they're operating in, right? So I think it's a very, very important question. My response to that is that I think we can do better than the original internet in the sense that the crypto protocols should make it as easy as possible for decentralized options to exist, even if there are centralized options there as well. So like, that's why I think it's really important for decentralized exchanges to exist for Bitcoin. Like right now, decentralized exchanges exist for Ethereum and some other assets, but not really for Bitcoin. Like there are very small, clunky ones with barely kind of like any volume on them, right? So that's why I think decentralized exchanges, like really good, high liquidity decentralized exchanges for Bitcoin are very important, because Bitcoin itself can be decentralized, but if you can't really trade it without going to a centralized exchange that might actually be complied by local regulations to actually ban you, then you can't really benefit from the technology. And similarly, I think that we should also set the appropriate expectations as well, that crypto protocols are not some sort of a silver bullet, that just because something is designed as a decentralized application, there aren't going to be centralized choke points. It's a little bit like decentralization is always a spectrum, and you have to do hard work to remove any centralization choke points that might be on the path of the end-to-end application. And I think that's a relatively complex topic, and we can obviously chat a lot more about it. But as a high-level framework, I think it's helpful to think of decentralization as a spectrum and having these almost like natural forces that will tend towards centralization. So you almost, as a community, you almost need to fight back and almost like demand for more decentralized options to exist in the ecosystem.
Like these videos, subscribe, and let us know what questions you have in the comments or on Twitter. And